Hey guys, Troy here. I've had the Osmo Pocket for 6 months now, and I've learned a lot about this little camera in the time that I've had it. When I was writing this video, I noticed that I sounded a little bit negative, so I want to clear that up right now. Even though I might talk about things that could be better on Osmo, the purpose of this video is to inform you what Osmo is like to use from the perspective of someone who has been using it since its release. Knowing the strengths and weaknesses of Osmo will enable you to use it correctly and get the most out of this little camera. I'll start off with something charming and weird, which is Osmo is impossible to set down. Now I know, just turn it off, but when I'm recording B-roll, I'll set down Osmo to move the subject in my scene and it just vibrates across the table. When it comes to photo quality, everything looks great. It's on par with the latest smartphones, but it might struggle a little bit in low light situations compared to phones like the Pixel 3 or the iPhone XS. It's definitely aided by the 3-axis gimbal. I do notice some pictures will turn out a little bit on the warm side, so just a heads up if your pictures look a little yellow. The more I've recorded with Osmo, the more I've accepted the microphones on this camera. They're pretty good. I don't think you really need to have an external microphone when vlogging with this camera, but compared to a lapel mic, you do notice a difference in the audio quality right away. The microphones are on top of the record and USB port, so it's very important how you hold Osmo because I often find myself holding up both when I hold it naturally. Moving on to video, you do really need to buy some neutral density filters if you're going to be using Osmo outdoors. When the shutter speeds up to 1/1000th of a second, to fill in the gaps between frames, Osmo applies a thick layer of resampling. Basically, this means artificial motion blur is added to the video, and DJI's processing algorithms don't look that good at all. A neutral density filter would block some light hitting the sensor, allowing the shutter to jump to 1/120th of a second or slower depending on which one you use. The closer your shutter speed is to your recording frame rate of 30 or 60 FPS, the less post-processing done by Osmo. I suspect when recording 4K, it can't soak the video in post-processing because of hardware limitations, so 4K looks sharp and clear. However, there are some fundamental flaws when recording 4K video. You see, 80% of my channel's views come from phones or tablets, and basically no phone has a 4K display. So to record and produce 4K video appeals to a small audience. I understand that DJI can't release a new camera and not have 4K capabilities, but it's unfortunate that the resolutions that it makes sense to use need extra effort to get right. The gimbal does make for smooth video. It eliminates any abrupt hand movements, making them almost unnoticeable. There are a few things to note, especially when the camera is facing you. Number 1. Because the gimbal allows the camera to fix its position on the horizon, as it moves, objects in the foreground pop out from objects in the background. Number 2. The gimbal isn't stabilized for vertical or horizontal movements. Number 3. This is unfortunate when vlogging, as your hand will move a few millimeters up and down when it's extended out in front of you. Combined with how objects in the foreground naturally pop out and you have smooth background where you bobble around on screen. Initially I thought this camera was perfect for vlogging, but I might change my mind on that. The last thing I want to share with you is there's a lot of accessories available for Osmo by DJI. And this might be a red flag because generally when manufacturers offer a lot of accessories or options, it means that the original product is stripped of features and they sell those extras to you. So the product suffers by being made around profit margin and not made to advance or innovate the industry. Now, I'm not saying DJI is doing this with Osmo, but it could be the start of a transition for the company where they used to develop new technologies to make their products better to selling you something they've already come up with. And I can't help but notice that Osmo was released with many features missing. Now, some of these have been added through firmware updates like slow-mo, and others have no public timeline for availability. With firmware adding features, does that mean Osmo gets better with time? Or does it mean that I bought an unfinished product?